Buongiorno a tutti, mio nome è Natasha, però I will speak in English because my Italian is not as good. I can follow most of the presentations, but I don't use it as much as I would like to, so I will speak in English. It's safe for you and me. My topic today is the accessibility of transportation. And I will get right to the point. Some of you may ask, why transportation? We are here to speak about accessibility, to speak about tourism. But without transportation, there is actually no tourism. There is no travel, and people cannot reach our destinations. On the other side, when people do come to our destination, they need to move around. They need to go to the hotel, to the attraction sites. They need to go to the restaurants to see what we offer, and they cannot move freely if our transportation system is not functioning, especially for people with disabilities who face many barriers, as we already heard today, so I won't be repeating. What often seems to be forgotten is the fact that accessibility is needed through the entire process. Not just when you are inside of a bus do you need it to be accessible. You need the information prior to your journey to be able to plan your journey in an accessible form. You need booking to be easily findable. When you get to the destination, you need to be able to get out of your bus or out of your train without any difficulties, without the need to ask perhaps for extra help. And when you come to a destination, as I already said, you need to move around. So this is a good quote from an actual person with disabilities that sums up what accessible transportation should really be about. It should be safe. It should be autonomous. It should be should provide a dignity to a person. It needs to be provided by people or staff, transportation staff who are educated on the matter, to know how to help and how to address people. It's not only about physical accessibility of the bus, of the transport station. The part of the information is also very important, because people with disabilities, when they are willing to travel and able to travel, if they don't have an information, if something is accessible, they won't be even thinking about travel. It's the same in tourism. It's better to put on your websites, on your information material, that some part of the service is not accessible than to not give any information at all. So we are often faced with a question when we do this kind of trainings is, why should I care about accessibility? I'm not a person with disability. Why should this matter to me? Regardless of the fact whether we are people with disabilities, if we are not, we are all getting older, we'll be older, we'll have some of our own difficulties. In some stage of life, we travel with children, have small children, which is a limiting factor on its own. So regardless of the fact if you're a person with disability or not, making something accessible, and it was a good point said earlier today, making something accessible and inclusive actually means more quality for all of us as a society. Because if something is accessible to a person with a disability, it doesn't mean it's not accessible to me. It's even easier for me to use it. And that's the point we often seem to forget. And as far as tourism goes, accessible transport services mean better quality of transportation system in general, and making it more acceptant to different kinds of people. So, who are passengers that often are denied access to public transportation, to different means of traveling for leisure purposes, not only for everyday purposes? Regulation in EU, it's quite good. basically for each transportation sector, there is a definition: who is a person with reduced mobility, person with a disability, and what this means in terms of services. But as often happens, the practical side of the story is lacking the implementation of this regulation. For example, in air travel, there is good sectoral regulation, there is EU regulation, there is a directive, so everything is put in place. But what happens in practice? You are traveling, you don't have any information on the airport's website if the airport is accessible, if you will get assistance that you require, if the connecting flight if you will be assisted to come in time, or if someone will take care of your luggage. There is a lot of things that you have to consider prior to travel, and it's time consuming, it's not cost efficient, and from the start of the story we said that travel should be dignified, and we lack people the sense of dignity and the sense of autonomy if we don't approach them as equals. So another fact to the story is what we said today, difference between visible and not visible disabilities. If we don't see, there are people with outwardly visible disabilities, but there is also a large segment of traveling market with different conditions that are not clear to eyes. We cannot maybe see them. It doesn't mean that a person does not require a bit modified, reasonable adjustment approach. I'm using quotes from market research that said how people felt in different situations while traveling, and the part of this invisible disabilities is huge. People say that they feel bad if they're not recognized for their needs, and making their travel experience not as it could be. So as far as traveling information on the one side and physical accessibility on the other side are all part of one unified approach that should exist. And what happens is not only that the transportation means, so a bus, a train, a taxi are not accessible. Not only informational part of the story, so website is maybe not in accessible form, but there is also part of people-to-people contact, untrained staff that provides you with the service, that needs to provide you with assistance during your travel. If the staff is not educated in how to communicate, in how to approach, in how to handle different needs, it adds to the problem, and it adds to a bad feeling, to an activity that in tourism should be an experience. So it should be good, it should be positive. The problem with regulation and implementation results in the fact that for people with disabilities, there is no minimum service guarantee. So if you travel especially from a country to country in Europe, you can face totally different circumstances, and this uncertainty is a huge part of the problem. Because if, for example, you are in a wheelchair and you're traveling from Italy to Germany and you are not sure what will happen when you come there, from my perspective, I wouldn't even go and take this journey, because it's the level of uncertainty and unsafety that would make me feel uncomfortable. So, should travel be difficult, costly, time-consuming from the planning stage through the entire journey, or can it be safe, comfortable, and equitable as far as social approach goes? I think we can all agree what's more acceptable and what should be happening. But as I said, practice is often lacking, and information not only online, information on site at transportation hub is either unavailable or not available in accessible form, or if the form is accessible, sometimes information about accessible services are missing. People at destinations, as I said, need to move around to be able to spend money, to be enjoying tourism experience. But local transportation also has its own difficulties. And for a foreigner in another country, this adds to a problem if you don't know if public transportation is accessible, if only some of the transportation means are accessible and you don't know which ones are. For example, in Croatia, many municipalities invested a lot of money to buy accessible low-floor buses. And it was a huge hit. Everyone invested, got European funding. They got the buses. But the problem was still the same. Yeah, there was no low-level station that could actually fulfill the function of the bus and enable people to get on the bus and to get out of the bus. So practice is often lacking, not only as far as service goes, but also as far as infrastructure goes, and wayfinding, seating, toilets, stairs, elevators, all could be modified with some simple, reasonable adjustments that could make us all travel with much more ease. Huge discussion is for the last 2 years about assistance animals, assistance dog, and their acceptance aboard different vehicles as far as travel and the transport of assistive technologies, because if not handled right, it could finish with a substantial damage because some of the assistance technologies are quite expensive and they get transferred as part of the cargo, as part of the luggage, which should be, I think, modified. So I won't go into too much detail. I will focus on transport because you heard enough today about information, about digital accessibility. But what often happens in practice, as far as tourism, but travel services providers are concerned, is that you have a primary website that is all nice and filled with information, functional, and you have the alternative, which should provide you with information about accessibility, and it's quite different, as this picture illustrates. We have an example of an airport here that basically reduces the information for passengers with reduced mobility, so for people with disabilities, to this. And it's not easy to find. It's really limiting. It gives you the information to call a number or to write an email, and you will get all the necessary information. So it's the basic minimum and below the minimum for people wanting to travel by air. So as you can see, many of different shortcomings can be found here. I won't list them. But a good example, it's the same airport, that's what's good about it, is that this is the entire site dedicated to potential questions, potential issues, accessibility of different kinds of parts of the services, whether it's boarding, it's building access, arrival at the airport and parking, offering assistance. And you can choose here at the top which kind of assistance do you need, or you can get specific information for your kind of disability, which I think it's quite good in comparison to the previous one that we saw. Local public transportation has a lot of issues. I already mentioned some, so I won't go into too much detail. But in Europe, we have old historic cities, we have stations that are in those historic buildings, and the options to implement some new features to improve accessibilities are often limited by the fact that those historical buildings are protected as a cultural monument. However, there is always a way on how to implement a solution, how to maybe provide access to certain areas of the building, how to consider this level, difference in level between a bus and a station. Simple solutions like adding a feature to a toilet, or, for example, eliminating one of the desks from a restaurant at the bus station to enable easier access. So there are always simple solutions that can be implemented in all different situations. One good example about public transportation, this is an American one, but regardless, the fact is that they've joined the Hidden Disability Sunflower, enabling people with hidden disabilities to get identified, but in a sophisticated manner. Not everyone has to know that someone is having a certain condition. Also, they improved the form, making more noticeable and with more contrast and with better coloring the destination of all of their buses. And what I liked most is the fact that they're changing all of the public transportation stations, not only providing tactile surfaces, so for blind people to be able to move around, but differences in tactile surfaces that perform the role of warnings. So this is a warning to know that here a cyclist can be approaching you, so you don't go out of the bus and get hit by a cyclist. Also, a good example in rail transportation in Great Britain, for example, there is a passenger assist application which enables passengers to get assistance when they come to a station with luggage, with accessing the trains, but also there is an interactive map with a list of all stations. When you click on it, you get the information about what is accessible, if there is staff able to provide you with assistance, or if this is a non-assisted station. So there is another matter that you should consider when planning your journey through these stations. So different levels of accessibility of the stations exist in practice, but it's noticeable, and you can get information in advance, and you can get help in advance. What also they help you with is this. If you have an assistance dog, they will give you a card. They will put a card in the train on the seat, and you can position your dog under the seat. And this is like a warning for other passengers not to sit on this seat under which your assistance animal lies. I will just list some of the mishappenings that are present in practice still up until this day. For example, information desks, check-in desks, ticket purchasing stations are often too high. For example, for a person in a wheelchair, they're often too high. And what also happens, there is no markings on a map, no markings in wayfinding system that suggest where you can get an actual information in face-to-face communication. Wayfinding is also having some shortages, not only for blind people, not only for deaf people. What happens in practice is that we have a combination of different methods of communication in space, but it's like checking the boxes. Okay, we have this for the blind, we have this for the deaf, we have this for the wheelchaired, but rarely does it happen that they consider needs of this specific disability in its entire journey through a station. For example, you have a tactile surface for blind people that leads you from the entrance to the persons with reduced mobility help station, for example. But if you want to go to the bathroom, there is no tactile surface. If you want to go to a coffee shop, eat something, drink something, there is no tactile surface. So basically what it makes you come and ask for help, and then you should sit and wait, and you cannot autonomously do anything on your own. None of us would like to travel like this. It makes you sort of feel like, I would I don't like saying it, but like a luggage. Okay, sit here and wait. We will transfer you when you need it. And I don't think there is much need for this. It can all be thought of in advance and with simple additions to the system, like audible information can be solved. With elevators, we like this modern design full of glass, but what's missing is color contrasting for maybe people that are partial-sighted and don't see the differences in surfaces. This could be a problem. Or lack of information that are not tactile, that are audible, also seems to be a problem. And lack of dedicated seating, for example. Why shouldn't people with disabilities be using the same seating area as all other passengers? Why not? I don't see the point of segregation. Okay, so these are some practical things that go on when people are traveling. And I won't go into details. This is just an illustration to see how much of this can happen. And this is from my perspective. Okay, I'm not a person with disabilities. If we ask people with disabilities to identify barriers, to identify issues during travel, they would find more, I'm sure, because our perspective is different. And that's why someone said it already today, you should ask people with disabilities to consult you, to let you know if what you think is a solution is actually a good solution from their perspective. Assistance animals is a huge problem in transportation. I will say huge because there is a report from 2025 saying that 50% of people get denied transportation because they use assistance animals, and they use certified assistance animals. So not my own dog I like and it's my pet, I will carry it with me. Having a guide dog is not for fun. It's for you to be able to fulfill daily tasks, to help you. So the inability to use transportation services with your support, with your assistance dog, it actually diminishes your ability to have an appointment, to come somewhere in time, to go to the doctors when your appointment is. So it influences the social aspect of life. I've looked for data for Italy, and what's good is, at least on the paper, it seems that assistants and guide dogs are allowed on all forms of public transport, and they travel for free. However, there is a distinction that causes many issues now in all forms of transportation. It's the surface of the term and of the animals that are used for emotional support. Yeah. Emotional support animals don't get the same treatment as assistance dog. You have to pay a fare for them to be able to join you on a journey. Most of the time, you will have to use a carrier for them. They are treated as your pet, not as assistance dogs, so quite the opposite. Some facts. Someone already said today that there is a huge economic potential behind providing services for people with disabilities. It's because this is a growing market segment. So I found a quote that says that the world's largest minority are people with disabilities. And I found it interesting because the way we treat people with disabilities seems like they're a marginal group, but the number is substantial and it's getting even bigger as we grow old. So I'm surprised with the fact that we have to constantly repeat that people with disabilities have the same right to use the bus, to use the plane, to use the public transportation, to travel as anybody else. I'm not sure why this isn't accepted, because the wealth of human race is our diversity. We're all different. So this is just another form of diversity. What European regulation stipulates is that people with disabilities, when traveling, cannot be denied transportation due to the fact that they have a disability, and they should be provided assistance if needed for free. It shouldn't be charged, and it should be by staff trained in order to provide with assistance. What gets misused in practice is the fact that the law also foresees situations and said that they cannot be denied transportation because of their disability. But if there is a safety issue, then you can deny them transport. And if technical side of the story, so if a plane, if a bus, if a train does not support people with disabilities use them, you can deny them with transport. I'm not sure about other transportation sectors, but in air travel, this happens more often than we would like to admit. I won't go into detail about regulation. I will just say that European Accessibility Act, which was actually trying to solve the problem of different regulation of different transportation sector, has improved some things, but for many it said the national legislation applies. And what it basically means is the fact that I started with is that in each of the member states, the condition of the transportation service, of the transportation system, of the acceptance of different passengers is different. So no minimum service guarantee. What is sometimes good if legislation is not providing you with guidelines on how to make your services more accessible is the ISO standard for accessible tourism that deals with transportation. However, although it's a good tool to assess your services, to adapt, to make some modification, it, like directives, like regulation, it does not focus on vehicles. It does not focus on the buses, on the trains, on the planes. So the same thing is missing from both. And finishing off with some best practice examples here in Italy and in Croatia, just to see what could be done to get maybe an idea what can be done. In air travel, for example, there was a project called Anche Io Volo. It was good for people with non-visible disabilities, more precisely for people with autism disorder, spectrum disorder. It enables preliminary visits to an airport to get to know the procedures to avoid stress on the day of your travel. But also there was a model plane in which these passengers, these people with autism, were situated in and get familiarized with how the flight looks like. So it's a good idea to avoid stress, to avoid confusion, and all the other things that can happen on the day of the travel. Yeah.
If you go to the website of the airport, have you seen it? We have a video in which people with autism find all the information to approach the flight. So.
Yeah, it's also one way of familiarization that gets used. Yeah, it's much cheaper to do it than this.
Sure.
Okay, I wanted to offer you an example of Croatian railway company because they started doing something on the accessibility issues and they've installed some platforms at major stations. But then I read about Trenitalia, Frecciarossa, Sala Blu, and I said, okay, I cannot say that this is a good practice example when you have in your own country a really good developed example of a railway company offering accessibility in transportation, especially in high-speed trains like Frecciarossa. So this is an advancement from what it was 2 years ago. but it's a long way to go to what an accessible system should be. And not to forget, so we are trying to be inclusive, not only for people with different disabilities. We already said there are different kinds of limitations that we all face during our life stage. So one of them is having small children and having to wait long while traveling. Dubrovnik Airport implemented something called Roger's Corner, and it's actually education while you play for children. It uses a real-life scientist from past and different disciplines of science that he participated in, and offers different kind of contents for children they can use while waiting, while being bored, and while it takes too long for their travel. So this is actually part of this project, derived from side project, and it's something tangible that you can actually see implemented in space. And I will stop talking. Thank you for your attention. I just want to say and repeat once again, and I think you're all here that because you know it, creating something accessible means something better for all of us. And the difference between us and them really does not exist. We're all people wanting to travel, wanting to go from place to place, wanting to go to our work, to our schools, to the doctors, to have fun for recreation or something else. And I think with the good base that you have here, we can continue building on. So thank you for your attention.